We were live. All right, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on data observability. In today's data-driven world, organizations are generating vast amount of data. In fact, I just talked about how we're producing and consuming more data than ever before. And that data can provide valuable insights for decision-making, but poor data quality can significantly impact the accuracy and the reliability of these insights, leading to missed opportunities, costly mistakes, and maybe even distrust between you and your consumers, right? So to help us better understand the challenges and think through solutions for ensuring data quality, we have a panel of experts with us today. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like first for each of you guys to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do in your current role. Shashank, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Selma, for that intro. So as you know, I'm Shashank, and I'm currently working as a senior data scientist at CVS Health. And my primary role here is basically use data-driven approaches to improve patient outcomes, their health, and also make sure that patients have a wonderful healthcare journey so that they don't face any surprises on the roadway. Yep.
Sarah, what about you?
Thank you, Selma. Hi, everyone. So a little bit about myself. I have a background in math, economics, statistics, engineering. At some point, I thought I'd go back to school and pursue work in renewable energy, but found myself at a fun startup, loving the tech scene. So I started working on a lot of fun projects in marketing analytics. I focused on campaign optimizations and LTV modeling. I followed that path for a bit before I found myself in revenue forecasting at Snap, and I've been here for the past 3 years, and I've seen a lot. So I'm excited to chat through some of that with you guys today.
Nice. Eric, what about you? Can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I've been in the finance industry since before the financial crash of '08, so been around a little bit. But got my start in traditional quantitative finance using statistical techniques for stocks, and also have worked with other asset classes and credit risk, so like stocks, bonds, stuff like that. But recently, in the past year, I've switched to cybersecurity and have used some of my AI ML talents to kind of pivot over to that. So, because there's a lot of data generated in that world from a lot of vendors. So the big need for sifting through it. So it's exciting work.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I think that we have a lot of different perspectives, and this will be interesting to kind of get your take on what garbage in, garbage out really means and what the implications of that are to different areas, right, of data and analytics. So let's dive into our first question. What are some of the most common causes of poor data quality that you've seen, and how can organizations address these issues at the source? Eric, I'll let you go first.
So the most common that I've found in the data, not data science world, but the finance world, is usually the origination point is there where the data is being generated. There's not a lot of controls around it. There's the joke about people are using Excel as a database, or maybe it's someone's just using a process to get the data back and forth over email. So, just to summarize it, it's usually a process problem, not necessarily specific to Excel, but that is common, is that there's a process problem. There's no controls around the original data inputs, even if occasionally manual entry needs to be done. But, there's no controls to make sure somebody didn't enter in GGGG into a numerical field, for instance, and then it makes its way into our stuff without good database controls or whatever it might be. So it's usually a process problem that has been around for a while and no one's fixed. So, you might have decades of this bad data floating around. They're like, but it's always the way we've done it, is the answer you get. So that's usually the most common that I've seen.
Interesting. Sarah, what do you think?
So I love that point, and I definitely agree. I think the most common things that I see are kind of bucketed into three major sections. So like ownership, communication, and then data source. So when I think about ownership, I think there's not enough communication over, ownership being like, if you see something, say something. I don't think there's enough of that sometimes. And people are like, okay, well, this might not be my issue. I'm not going to escalate it. So it never gets prioritized. So feeling like ownership across across everyone who touches that data source as an end product. And then second, related to communication is, are there proper channels to escalate issues with data quality? Sometimes those processes may not be established. It may not be clear who the owners are. And so if that's the case, then you might end up finding downstream processes that are developed on top of bad data that may be fragile, may be unreliable, and may easily break with time. And then the last one is really related to multiple data sources. So I like with so many pipelines to maintain from a data engineering perspective, and without observability to monitor the pipelines, engineers are really relying on subject matter experts and domain experts to really bubble up issues, which kind of ties into the communication and the ownership pieces. So at least from my experience, what I'm seeing is that companies and teams are really set up to work from a bottoms-up approach to data quality. Subject matter experts find the issues, identify the problems. They're closest and most intimate with the data and how it ends up tying into data products and reports that we build. And so it comes bottom up to the engineers, but really with data observability, I feel like it flips this process on its head and puts a little bit more ownership and responsibility on data engineers to really own and identify issues before they make it all the way down. So ideally, it's this feedback loop between domain experts and data engineers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Shashank, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Eric's and Sarah's point, that it's primarily, at the source system, which, if there is an issue there, that kind of flows downstream. And, what I've seen, especially in bigger organizations, they have like a number of, source systems serving each different purpose, which, captures various amounts of data. And, sometimes it happens that those, source systems are, siloed, there is no kind of integration across. And that's why, when we have to, generate a unified data from those source system, it might create, really messier data set, which is kind of, unreliable and not good use for our, data practitioners. So I believe, making that standardization process, really cognizant when, these source systems are built, I think that can go a long way in, taking that issue into control.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we think about anything on the back end, right, like data related, we're often thinking about like the technology and the wireframes and all of that. But I think something common across all of y'all's comments has been culture, right? And the culture for the people that are consuming the data, but also the culture of the people and the organization that's making that data available, and ensuring that data quality is kind of top of mind and that they have processes and culture built around that. I'm interested to hear if you guys can provide any real world examples of when garbage out data quality has impacted the final product. What are the business implications and consequences of poor data quality? Sarah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I feel like we actually end up at least 4 times a year, we have very extensive planning processes. And in this process, we end up updating CRMs and a lot of integrating third-party data sources. And there's a lot of moving parts around that process. And it touches a lot of hands and a lot of teams are impacted in this process. So it's very time intensive, very resource intensive, and typically ends up creating a delay in when we're able to really stand up reports that can be meaningful and drive strategy. And sometimes that does end up kind of impacting what we can do in the beginnings of a particular quarter, and how we can get visibility into how the business is doing and the health. So this is really a very coordinated effort, and one that involves a lot of just understanding of where the data's at and time for things to settle. And yeah, usually we see a lot of downstream impacts and a lot of maybe reports that break in the process. And if there's no real communication flow of when we're making, any additional updates to downstream processes, then you end up with bigger issues than the ones you started with.
Eric, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I've in quant finance, I've seen it where data quality made its way into trades. So I've seen a direct financial impact where bad trades been made, where a particular field shifted from a normal value of around 350 to 5, and the data vendor didn't have any checks on it for any reasonableness of stuff like that. So it was data for a major S&P 500 company that we were getting. And so, it directly impacted, some of the trading that occurred that day. And I've on Sarah's point, yeah, I've seen it happen on dashboards too, where all of a sudden the dashboard, hey, this doesn't look right at all. The chart's a nice normal line, then all of a sudden it's boop, and no one knows why. So that's another commonality there. So I've seen a direct financial impact, but the most common, is dashboarding. Whether it's Power BI, Tableau, or whatever flavor you're using, but that's probably the other common one.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting to think about kind of like the implications of like garbage out, right, on your products, but also the cost of not having data observability built within your processes to really kind of like, alert users or whoever, that this data is kind of outside of our competence interval, and we need to do some checks there. Shashank, what do you think about that? Do you have any examples of kind of garbage out and the implications?
Right, definitely. So I feel like in terms of, garbage in, it's not just the, data quality issue. Let's say, if even if, the data is captured accurately, there are multiple, factors which can, make that data not usable. So let's say if the current data system or the data source does not capture the relevance data, which the data practitioners want to use for. So in that case, also, it really does not make sense to use that kind of data. And I have seen, this special implications, especially in the pandemic times. So, during the initial days when the pandemic started in, people came out with, all kind of predictive models to, predict deaths or infection rate in the COVID times. But, most of those models were far away from the, actual numbers when it came through. Instead, there was a data scientist in finance who kind of, developed his model based on very simplistic assumptions and, only capturing the accurate data in place. And that model kind of superseded the, other models, which was, funded by government or universities, etc. So I think that kinds of highlights this, principle that, we really need to make those, foundation really simplistic, and then kind of, top of that, build the downstream approaches or models.
It's interesting. Yeah. And when you guys were giving your intros, I knew that this was going to be a great session for our users, because you guys have so many different perspectives, right? And what the implications are to financial markets, to human beings, to businesses. So I love that. I just dropped a session that talked about the dawn of a new era with generational AI. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about emerging technologies and approaches that can help organizations address kind of classic data problems such as duplication, inconsistency, and completeness. Is your organization using advanced analytics and automation to help monitor data quality? If so, how? And what role does domain expertise play? Shashank, do you want to take that one?
Sure, definitely. So I guess I would kind of speak in a general sense here. So, when it comes to domain expertise, I feel, as Sarah mentioned, communication is kind of, a right process when, those foundational groundworks are done for, preparing an organization's data warehouse. So there has to be a proper sync between the, domain experts and the, engineers, architects who are kind of involved in framing that. This kind of, makes sure that the final output or the final data which is being delivered to, data scientists or practitioners is more intuitive and, easy to comprehend for them rather than, a mystery ball, in which they have to figure out on their own, what exactly is the content of that data.
Eric, what do you think about that? Do you have is your organization using emerging technologies and advanced analytics?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've had to migrate to in terms of being able to process a lot of the data that's needed for the gazillions of customers that exist, and also the amount of products that they use. So, anything from, using recommendation engines and, big data products like Spark, things like that, as opposed to some of the older school technologies, because, more data came through in the last 10 years, didn't go down. So we've had no choice but to kind of migrate towards that. As using old stuff like SAS isn't going to work, in terms of being able to handle it, especially if you need it quicker.
Yeah, and something that I talked about in that session of like kind of that, the new era in terms of generational AI has been just the amount of like competitiveness that it's garnered and induced. And I've seen this lift in like advanced analytics being used to ensure quality and throughout the data pipelines. So it's been interesting, right? It's kind of like it's raising the bar. If one service provider, like one platform can do it, everybody else begins to incorporate that. And I think that that's a good thing, right, for ensuring data quality and observability. So I'm curious because we started the session talking a little bit about processes and people. I'm curious to hear from you all what role leadership, culture, hiring practices, and your org design play in prioritizing quality initiatives and then ensuring that data quality efforts are sustainable and continue to improve over time. Sarah, I saw you smiling, so I'm interested. What do you think?
Yeah, I love this question just because I think it gets to the heart of what drives true good data quality in an organization. And it really, I believe, starts at the top, and it starts with leadership buy-in and leadership understanding of the complexity of the time, the resourcing, and then setting up the team and the organization for success in order to achieve this. Ways where I've seen this go wrong is when there's no data engineering support for teams that are in need of it. And so you find analysts or data scientists or folks who have some skill set kind of lean in to that area and start to develop their own downstream pipelines or their own, their own pipelines. And that becomes really, I want to say it's not sustainable, right? And so, and not only is it not sustainable, it's typically fragile and it needs to be like kind of developed more productionalized through engineering support. But it's also, depending on where you sit, may or may not be valued, depending on the role. And so if you take on these extra tasks and work on back-end pipelines, that may or may not be valued by the leadership, depending on your role. And I've personally seen this undervaluing of this particular skill set when it's not the particular role. And so that's where I think it's really important to get buy-in from leadership. It's really important to set up the team for success and then understand, is it a centralized or decentralized approach? How are we going to structure the team and allocate resources in order to make sure that we are prioritizing data quality into reporting and into data products as a whole? So hugely important.
Do you think that there's like one kind of structure that works the best to ensure that, you know, data quality is happening and observability without having like a team dedicated to that?
I don't know without having a team. I think we've moved to kind of centralize as much of this, at least between common teams that use the same data sets. So I've seen an effort to kind of get the requirements from each team and build a unified data source that can accommodate the use cases across like finance, revenue strategy, sales ops, and that be our kind of central hub. And we have owners that'll own those pipelines. What it used to be historically is that we'd have team members who graciously set up pipelines themselves, but then, you know, upon their departure or if there's like time constraints, it's hard to get support to ensure that we can keep those pipelines up. And so I don't know if there's one silver bullet here. I think it just depends on the teams and the organizations and how they're structured and the use cases.
Yeah, Eric, what do you think? What role does leadership and culture play in prioritizing data quality initiatives?
There it goes. I'd say the number one thing that they need to enforce is transparency, because kind of what Sarah was talking about is you end up with a lot of fragmented processes, and then you end up with data silos floating all over the place. And then I have my own process that I'm running on the side on the server that I kind of don't have officially running, and I'm running it in a Jupyter notebook that's poorly written, and it's outputting stuff to a folder no one really sees, and they only see an Excel file once a month. Well, there's a lot of that goes on in some bigger organizations, and you kind of have to work on enforcing that transparency aspect of that. And it's not that you want to punish anybody for it, but you want to encourage that, because if you make it a consequence model, well, then that people are going to hide it better. It's just human nature. I'm not knocking anybody, so I get it, because you're just trying to get it done. But the other part of that is having the support from leadership on platform support. You hear a lot of them say we want to do AI, but what you don't hear a lot of them say first is we want to do platform engineering first before, in order to support our data scientists, because you don't want, I'm sure Shashank's a great data scientist, but if I have him going and working on trying to stand up my Spark and my Apache server so that a way we can get it done, how much data science work is he going to get done? The answer is very little. I'm sure he's perfectly capable to do it, but it's not his number one attribute. And I see that happen at a lot of companies where the leadership support on platform support is kind of like not there. And they're like, oh yeah, the Spark, that's your job as the data scientist. What do you want me to do? Machine learning? So I think that's the other two key things that really need to be there, because if you have sunlight, it's the best disinfectant for a lot of things. Like you got a bad data process, Sarah can go see it and be like, hey Eric, why are you doing this here? I'm like, oh, probably should fix that.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've been thinking a lot about too. So, to Sarah's first point about like, it's something that's important. And we talked about kind of the business implications of it, but not highly prioritized. And I have seen teams that have been dedicated to governance and data quality be the first ones to go, right? And that kind of puts not you guys, but puts people at risk, right, when they're a part of those teams. But then it also puts organizations at risk because they don't have the levers to ensure that data quality is happening. And then the cultural aspect of it, again, that's been really interesting for me, because I even think about, I saw somebody in the chat had talked about where the chief data officer sits, and organizationally, right? Like, is your CIO or CDO sitting on the board and reporting to the CEO, or are they reporting to the COO? Are they reporting to the CFO, which is a little bit more antiquated, right? And I think that also reveals a little bit about like the company's culture around data and analytics in general. And I think the companies that are more bought in, that are embracing some of the technological advancements, are doing a better job at ensuring that they have good data observability and quality, because it really kind of has big implications on the insights that they're delivering and the, their bottom line, essentially, because that's the data that they're using to make decisions off of. So I think that I don't have any other questions really prepared. I did have a lightning round that I just thought up, given some of the conversations that we've had. Do you guys, like, what do you see when you think about the future of DNA regarding data observability in particular? Like, do you see a future where people are accessing dashboards and they can see an alert that says, oh, this data is, this mark is an outlier, do more investigation, or maybe an even more automated process where it identifies those outliers and it kickstarts the investigation without having teams do that manually? What do you guys kind of think about when you think of the future? Shashank?
Sure. So I guess, as you mentioned about generative AI, making footfalls in the industry currently. And I believe like one of these application of, large language models can definitely be, utilized to serve, future needs. And primarily, I think so because, those LLMs are highly rich in business context. They can be, retrained with minimal effort in a particular organization's data. So what they can do is really, help create data validation rules at the source systems, which kind of, tracks whether the data flowing into the pipeline is correct or not. And that's how, I think they can be really useful tool in identifying inaccuracies in a larger data set.
Speaking on you,
Yeah.
Sarah, what do you think when you think of the future?
I mean, I loved what you described. I feel like a vision for the future would be similar to what y'all just described, and then with some human element. So like a lot of it, the process being automated to, run the checks, to validate, to, basically allow for everything. Data observability basically is like the monitoring and the observing of the process, and then having some maybe recommendation of a kickoff of a process to help fix, or things that we can essentially do to fix the issue, but having some human validation component. And so everything I think that we've been talking about in the space and where things are moving is like automate 80-90% and then incorporate some validation and checks that we can oversee and make sure is correct.
Yeah. Eric, do you have any big visions for data observability?
Yeah, I think one of the things we run into in cybersecurity a lot that's probably unique to some of the other ones is I realize there's probably data sets that a lot of other use cases have where they don't have labels, but I'm sure most of them they do. In cybersecurity, we're unique where we don't have labels. The hackers don't label our data. Hey, we hacked you here at this date and time. You don't get the ones and the zeros. You usually have to go find them yourself, and even then, you might not want to label it anyways yourself, because the hard part is you might be you don't know which ones you're missing. So the data observability on us for the automation and finding outliers is huge, and being able to get that part done. So for cybersecurity, that properly dashboarding is a key for that. Not just the modeling and unsupervised learning, that's part cool, but you do have to have the right observability on the data, so that way your data SMEs, whether it's a cyber threat hunter or SOC analyst, whoever it might be, or your red teams. A lot of cybersecurity terminology there for you today, but whoever needs to go observe it can actually observe the ground data to say, hey, look, this is a problem we need to go investigate, or this is a vulnerability, things like that. The other thing, observability, that I really enjoying and hope gets more touching, especially with the generative AI, is data ethics as well. I hope that there's more sunlight on that, because I don't think there's enough in that one, but I think there will be more as more dashboarding gets better and better over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree that ethics kind of has not been brought to the forefront of this, but it's something that's imperative, given like all of the changes that are happening, and again, the implications at the human level of them. And something, again, kind of just looping the thread between all of the comments and feedback from you guys and insights has been, right, having a process to observe the data. And so that can be some of that automation there, right? And then making that observation, right, available and visible to end users. So that's that visibility piece and that culture piece, right? And how do we action on that? What do we do with that if we know that, you know, there are outliers or perhaps poor data quality, right? Like, how do we react to that, and how do we ensure that it doesn't happen going forward? So any closing thoughts from you guys? This was super insightful for me, and I hope for the audience as well. No? Okay, well, thank you to our panelists for those valuable insights. It's clear that, you know, data observability is complex and it's multifaceted, but it's crucial for organizations in order to make informed decisions. And I hope that you guys found this session as, you know, useful as I did. I just feel like this was a big perspective opener for me. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Selma. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.